Well, hi there! I recently got a couple of new bearded dragons. And actually, if you look at them up close, you'll notice that one of them is a baby and the other is an adult. And they are not the same species of bearded dragons. But the real take home is, I need 2 new bearded dragon enclosures. And fortunately, the sponsor of this video, dubiaroaches.com, let me know when we were planning our last video where we showcased a whole ton of really rad feeders that you can get from dubiaroaches.com and what their strengths are as feeders for different sorts of animals at different times. They mentioned that they have these enclosures. And I said, well, I would like to see what these are all about. So I have built one, and I want to take you through the process of building another. And then I want to give you my real takeaways as to what I think of this as a bearded dragon enclosure. But I can tell you right up front, I'm impressed with the thing. So let's check this out. So here it is. The Reptile Habitats 4 foot by 2 foot by 2 foot PVC screen-topped enclosure for bearded dragons and other such creatures. As you can see, I've already built one of these, which I'm glad that I did. It does have assembly instructions, a little QR code you can scan there. I watched a few videos, kind of like hopefully this one will be helpful if you're building one of these yourself, or if you just want to see if this is something you think you can do. I can tell you the only tools that you'll need that aren't included with this are, I would say, a power screwdriver is very, very helpful. You only need it for one thing. It's like 8 screws. And you could do it with a regular screwdriver, but it takes a little bit of force. Other than that, you just need a knife to get this box open. It really comes with everything. It's pretty amazing. The logo looks a little familiar, don't you think? All right, let's dig in. Handy dandy Skeletool never hurts. We'll have a link to that down in the description because it is the greatest tool known to mankind. It's got these nice covers for the corners. That's a big deal because you don't want this stuff to get damaged while shipping. So they've got in here, everything's nicely packaged in foam. It's very form-fitting. And then the actual panels themselves, they might look like they're all scratched up and they kind of have a bluish hue. That's not really what's going on with the panels. The panels have a film that protects them, plastic film that you peel off. They're kind of like a matte black, not this reflective sort of blue-black that they look to be, and they're definitely not damaged, which they may look like that. This keeps them safe. I will tell you, it's a little bit of a challenge to peel it off, but it's totally doable. Totally doable. So this is either the back panel or the bottom, and I don't think there's a difference between them. This is the other one, so back panel or bottom. Side panel, and the side panel has a hole. That hole has a little insert, and you can use that to run wires, so you can easily put your lights on the inside, which is handy because these are potentially stackable. And my other one was like this too, and I don't know why they do this. It's not a big deal, but they've got them taped with double-sided tape to the sliding acrylic doors. I suppose it just keeps them from moving around in there. I don't really know why they do it that way. It's no big deal because both of these panels are covered in protective film, so the tape doesn't get stuck to the actual panels. Here's the other one. Then we've got the screen top, and the screen top comes almost entirely assembled, but not entirely assembled. So basically everything is done. All 4 corners, it's got these. This assembles very easily with just a mallet, but you do need to attach 2 crossbars, and that's what you'll need your screwdriver for later. This, it's still covered in a film, but that is this panel right here. These are your 4 remaining corners because the other 4 corners are incorporated into the lid piece. So I'm going to save these. We're going to need these sooner than later. And then let's see here. We'll lift this up. I opened the box upside down. I find it easier to do it that way. So these are all the parts that we're going to need sooner than later. These are the wire covers for the side panels. So we don't need those yet. These are pieces of hardware for the doors and for the top. So these are the brackets for these crossbars that go across the top, and also the handles for the doors. These are all of your other pieces that you're going to need to build the basic frame of the enclosure. And this is something that I have found very, very handy because I've actually assembled quite a lot of enclosures that assemble this way where you have to kind of hammer them together. You can do it with your palm, but that kind of hurts. I recently finally went out and got myself a rubber mallet because I've assembled enough of these that I'm getting tired of hurting myself or not getting it done very well. This is a really stupendous rubber mallet, and it comes with it, which I really, really appreciate. And it's got 2 different hardnesses of rubber. So this one I think is a little bit softer. This one's a little bit harder. And so depending on exactly how much force you need to do, this is just great because it won't maim anything, but it is just so darn handy. So I'm really grateful for this, that this comes with the package. This being actually a very reasonably priced enclosure, it's kind of amazing that they chuck in little things like that. But all right, so let's see here. This stage where you're building your frame, it is really, really important that you pay attention to what you're doing, because if you make mistakes at this stage, I mean, you've got to take it all apart. And once you pound this together, pounding it back out is, I mean, it's very doable. I had to do it a couple times when I was building this one. I've had to do it with other brands, but it's easier just to do it right the first time. So try to pay attention to what you're doing because order of operations will matter. I imagine the QR code will talk you through order of operations really well. One thing to definitely take note of is these little holes on the corners. You get the hole on one of the 3 sides, but not all 3. And those are the bottoms. So when you're building your frame out, you need to do some spatial reasoning. You need to think this out. Those are going to be the bottoms, wherever those holes are. And there shouldn't be any of the holes on any of the other parts. You'll see the top also has that holes. It's my understanding that when you're stacking these, they'll use those holes somehow. So you definitely want those on the bottom and the top. It's probably not as big of a deal if you're not planning to stack them. But again, you might end up looking at those holes when you don't want to. And so if you're any sort of perfectionist, that might get to you. All right, so let's get all these out because this is something else you need to pay attention to. So this piece, for example, has got a single track on either side. That single track is going to be for a single panel. That means this isn't part of the sliding doors. Anywhere where you've got double tracks, like you see right here, that's for the sliding doors because there's 2 panels that need to be able to slide over each other. So that's where you see these differently. And this is actually an upright panel, and so the doors slide into those tracks. So just pay attention to any panels that have doubles. If they have doubles, then it's part of the door assembly. And quite conveniently, it's not too easy to make that mistake because the pieces with the doubles are also totally different. In some similar enclosures, I've run into situations where you've got beam pieces like this, support pieces that look almost identical, but that happen to have the double grooves. This one is going to be this piece right here, and it actually attaches to these very, very nicely. And you can see, so these are your uprights at the front, and they've got a little attachment point for that cross beam there. So what I'm going to build first, just because I can, is I'm going to build the front, the very front of the enclosure. So I want to make sure that I'm not actually going to use these just yet because I need to make sure that I get this piece inserted before I put them on or I won't be able to get it in there. All right, so this is part of the front. You can see the little reptile habitats. This is the double sliding part, so that's the part that's up because that's where the sliding doors go. Below that is just the single panel that doesn't move. And then these, make sure I get them in the right location. So this is a spot for one of them. And you just put these square pegs into the square holes, and then you're not going to be able to push them in there. Fortunately, we've got our handy dandy mallet. Perfect. All right, now I'm going to do the other side. Same way, make sure that I've got this slot facing backwards because that's the main enclosure. Get it in there. Perfect. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to build the bottom. And in order to do this, I want to make sure that I have all of these with the holes down because I'm going to kind of map out where every piece goes before I actually build it. So this is going to be part of that. This can be either the front or the back. This will be the other one. Make sure that my grooves are always facing in. 2 of them are cross beams, and 2 of them are the uprights for the back, and I don't think there is any difference between them, so you can use whichever ones you want. Just make sure the grooves are in and up. All right. That looks right. Now here's the last, this is a really important thing to realize. If I put all 4 of these corners on at the same time, I'm not going to be able to get the bottom piece of PVC slid in there. So what I want to build is I want to build one of these pieces here with the 2 caps in it, and then I want to leave this out. Okay, I do not want to include this afterwards. So I'm going to put that there. 2 for 1. This is now going to sit over here until that bottom panel is in, because if I forget that, I won't be able to get it in there. Okay, at that point I'll build another one of these. Again, making sure that both of my holes are down. Fancy. Okay, now I'm going to add on these long pieces. Perfect. Okay, remember to stop here. You gotta stop here or you'll have a real problem. At this point, what I need to do is I need to peel one of the big 4 foot by 2 foot panels. I'm gonna work on getting one of these guys peeled, and I did get kind of a technique for it. Took me a while to develop this. Obviously, you've just got to get it started. It's usually easier at a corner. This film is on there, and so my technique that I developed is you peel all the way across. So peel from one side all the way to the other side of the 2 feet. And then it's easier if I can brace it against something, but then I peel down, and as I peel, I kind of roll it up. And I am noticing that this panel has a little bit of a dent in it. Not too bad, but I am going to try to make that on the inside of the enclosure because that will not be exposed. This is the floor of the enclosure, so it probably won't be a big deal anyway, but well, then it's on the outside. If it's inside, it's going to be covered up. So just keep peeling and rolling. Peeling and rolling. If you don't roll it, it can tear on you. And as long as you go slowly enough, that's not a big deal, but you don't want to have to start it constantly. And then you feel this huge sense of accomplishment. You're like, I did it! And then you remember, there's another side. Okay, back to work. The good news is there's only like 1 million of these panels, so this is how I managed to get a pretty good system. Practice makes perfect, right? Really, these big panels are the biggest pain, and there's only 2 of them. Somehow I'm winded by the end of it. So then, Mr. Jason, while I'm peeling this, let me ask you this. Do we have a discount code for everybody?
Yes.
We do? All right. So if at any point during this video you decide that this might be the enclosure for you, we do have a discount code with dubiaroaches.com that will be down in the description to this video. So save a little money. And I mean, like I was saying, this already is a pretty reasonably priced enclosure, especially when you consider how big it is, because it is colossal. And you'll feel every inch of it while you're peeling this film off. Now I can feel actual accomplishment. Look at what I've done. All right. What we're going to do is we're going to slide it in here. Okay. And then make sure it slides all the way into the gap at the far end. Which, there it goes. At that point, make sure you got your holes on the bottom. You grab your other piece and you make sure you get the holes also on the bottom. Stand it up. Go a little bit slow when you do this because you don't want to be destroying the piece of PVC if you don't have it quite lined up. So just go kind of slowly. And that's the bottom. So at this point, I'm going to put the front on. And first thing I'm going to need to do is do the easiest bit of peeling that you're going to do at any point during this enclosure, which is to peel the film off from this little piece. And I got to say, this little piece is one of my very favorite parts of this enclosure, and I actually like basically everything about it. I don't really have any major complaints about it, but I've got to say one thing, some of the other enclosures that I've seen that are similar to this one, the doors will go all the way to the bottom. And usually they've got some sort of a solution if you want to put substrate in there. But I never liked that. It just ends up with you getting substrate in the tracks and having substrate fall out. It's just difficult. Just difficult and kind of like an afterthought. This is really thought out from the beginning, and I really, really like this design. So this piece is one of my very favorite parts of this whole thing, and I actually think this whole entire enclosure is really well thought out. But this is nice. Isn't that nice? Okay, so you go ahead and you slide that down into its little spot. Then make sure your Reptile Habitats logo is on the outside, because this is the very front of the enclosure. Slide that down into the tracks. And just like we did on this bottom piece, bring those down into there fairly slowly so that you don't accidentally damage this acrylic piece if it's not quite lined up with the tracks. So just perfect. That's the front. At this point, we're just going to put on these uprights. They're pretty easy as long as you have the tracks facing in the right directions. So there's one, and there's one. Suddenly it's looking like an enclosure. Unfortunately, at this point, we've got 3 panels of peeling to do. Jason and I are going to get peeling, and we'll see you on the other side. All right, now that we've completed our peeling party, we can install these, and the installation of these is really easy. So the main thing is this hole here. You want to make sure that's on the top side and towards the back. And that's really all there is to it. It's not very complicated. Same deal with this side. And then this back panel, the directionality doesn't matter. The main thing that does matter is you have to do this before you put the top on or you're stuck. And just make sure it seats all the way down into this track down here so you don't break it when you pound the top on. But at this point, we would be ready, well, not quite ready, but we could start moving towards putting the top on. And I am going to go ahead and build the top, but we've actually got one more step because we're not building the standard version of this enclosure, but we are building it with one of these unbelievable prefabricated backdrops that you can also get them through dubiaroaches.com. I think our discount code that we have that's down in the description will save you some money on that as well. And I really wanted to try these out just to see what they're like. I prefer things to be real. I really, really don't like most artificial plants and artificial rocks and things of that nature. But I wanted to see how good these were. Online they looked like they were really, really nice. And I can tell you, they're pretty darn impressive. I wouldn't say they look exactly like real rocks, but they've used a very, very flexible, lightweight material to make the rock, and then they've covered it in something that genuinely feels and looks like real rock. It's really, really impressive and lightweight. So this entire enclosure, even though it's huge and full of rocks, hardly weighs anything at all. It's amazing. But I've got a different color for us, so I'm going to unbox that and put that in here because the fit is very, very precise. And once the lid is on, it gets pretty difficult to wedge it in there. So let's build that lid, and then we'll get that backdrop out and get it in here. Won't need these doors till the end. Oh, we will be needing these. And in fact, we darn well put these on before we put that backdrop in. So I'll show you how to do that really quickly. It's real easy. You don't even need any tools for this. So this is a little thing that you can spin so it can cover up all the holes for the wires, or you can open it to expose a spot for, looks like about 6 different wires to come through, which is pretty awesome. It just screws into itself, so it's actually 2 pieces. There's a piece that goes on the outside and a piece that goes on the inside. The little ring here goes on the inside, and you just thread it back onto itself. You just need to know which way is righty-tighty and which way is lefty-loosey. I have no idea. Okay, one done. So what I've got right now, I've got these 2 crossbars for the top. I really don't know why they're not just built into this top, because the top is otherwise completely constructed But I guess it gives you a little sense of satisfaction because you get to do 8 screws. And here, I'll try it first with my Skeletool just to see how difficult that would be. And if I decide it's fairly difficult, I'll go ahead and go with the power drill. Skeletool, the world's finest tool. So my conclusion is it's too big of a pain in the neck to do with a standard screwdriver because you've really got to drive it into the screen itself. Like there's a pre-drilled hole through the metal frame, but not into the screen. You have to drive it into the screen. And with a power drill, power driver, it was really easy to do. With my Skeletool, as great of a tool as the Skeletool is, it's too big of a pain in the neck. I'll be right back. All right, now we're ready to go. I do appreciate that it comes with 4 extra screws. So if you mess that up, lose a screw, you'll be fine. I don't know why though. They don't just come prefabricated, but not that hard as long as you have a power driver. If you don't, I think you'd at least need a drill to kind of drill some pilot holes into that screen a little bit because it is just too hard to drive it with a standard screwdriver. But with that, our lid is done. And at this point, it says front on one side. And so you would just put it on here and pound it down. That said, that's not how we're going to do it because we've got the backdrop and also a floor liner, I believe, that we're going to put in there first. It would just be really difficult to wedge it in there once the lid is on. So let's get to work on that. Now I did find, well, let's open it first and then I'll tell you the one extra thing that I found I needed to install this just right. And this isn't an oversight. This is because they want you to have multiple options. Let's open this thing up though. So this comes in an even bigger box than the whole enclosure because this doesn't fold up quite as small as the full enclosure does. Honestly, when these arrived, I'd almost forgotten that they were sending the backdrops. And so I was like, what is in this huge box? Be careful that you don't cut it. Okay. There it is. All right, so this is the kind of slate gray floor liner. I've got the red sand in that one, and so that can just be tossed in there. And this, ooh, this is the connector kit. Okay, so I've got a connector kit so I can stack these enclosures, which I'm pretty excited about. And then I've got this bad boy. Oh, I gotta tell you, I was probably more excited about the red originally than I was about this gray-black. But now that I'm seeing this, I really like this. I've always had an affinity for red rocks. I think they're beautiful. It's one of the things I love about places here in Utah. There's a lot of really special spots that have red rock in them. Actually, in our video Closer to Nature, I took you to one of my very favorite places, and it's red rocks everywhere. It actually looks a heck of a lot like that. This, though, is really, really pretty, at least here. Let's see what it looks like in the enclosure. Okay, so I'm just going to loose fit it into here now. There's a gap that goes at the top. Okay. Now the reality is, I don't need to get it all installed. I just need to get it inside of the box before I put the top on. I think it would be totally possible to wedge it in there afterward, but I think it would be much, much harder. And so just getting it in the box, now we can go ahead and put that top on. But I can tell you, it looks really cool. It looks really cool. I definitely like that slate gray bottom. That looks awesome. So, all right, let's get to it. All right, with this part, you're going to need to be really careful because it would be very easy. You saw kind of some of the difficulties we had with originally getting the PVC to seat in the bottom. You can have that same problem as you're pounding in the top. But if it's not seating, you could potentially be kind of breaking it. And so if you don't want to do that, which I don't think you do, we're going to go ahead and do it kind of carefully. I'm going to pound these a little bit, get them seated in there. This is the top that we didn't assemble. Came pre-assembled. All right. So I'm going to just do it a little in each corner. That's going in there nicely, as is that piece, as is that one. Great. So just like that, we've got the whole lid on. The entire enclosure is together except for the doors. We haven't put the doors on yet. And at this point, we can do one of two things. We can either put the doors on, or we can finish installing the backdrop. When I built this one, I went ahead and put the doors on first, and then I put the backdrop in. It'll probably be negligibly easier if I put the backdrop in first. And all I'm going to do, so you've got a lot of options as to how to secure this in place. And I think to some degree, it's going to depend on what you're putting in here. If I was putting something in here like, say, a leopard gecko, which this would be such a palace for a leopard gecko, or maybe a snake, what I would probably do is I would probably silicone the whole thing. Silicone all these panels. I would do all of that before I put the top on, and I would silicone this thing in place so that they can't get behind it. That'd be one option. However, what I intend to put in this is a bearded dragon. And bearded dragons are not like masters of wedging themselves into things. And I would like for this backdrop to be relatively easy to remove in case I need to do a really, really deep clean on it. I think you could do a pretty great clean just in place, but just in case. So what I'm going to do is I got some Velcro, and I'm just going to put some squares in a few places here on the sides, and that's going to allow me to Velcro this in place so it stays really nicely. Before I do that, I'm just going to kind of get it friction fit into place. So I know I've got enough space for both ends, and it almost will stay there just on friction fit. The precision to which this backdrop is made for this enclosure is exceptional. I would imagine it would fit into any or almost any 4 foot by 2 foot by 2 foot enclosure, but like I said, the allowances are pretty small. I mean, it is really, really made for this. You could cut it down a little bit if you needed to, but it just goes right into place. It's easy, honestly, far and away the easiest backdrop I've ever installed in anything. Let's put that in place in a permanent way. All right. So this is what I got, is just some 2-inch wide Velcro brand Velcro. If you're having trouble figuring this out, we'll put a link to it down in the description. But it's got 2 sides. It's Velcro. You're probably familiar with it. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pair it up, and I'm going to cut essentially like 2-inch squares. So you will need some scissors. And this is self-adhering, I guess. Has adhesive built into it. And I'm just going to need 4 of these. That's all I used on the first one anyway. I could do more, but 4 was plenty. Right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use 2 of these on each side. And I don't know if this really matters, but you can do it any direction you want. I know it doesn't matter, actually. But I just peeled off one side of the Velcro, only one side, and I put it in the top corner here. And then I did the same thing in the bottom corner. I could easily use a lot more Velcro than this if I wanted to, but this seemed like enough. Because like I said, just friction fitting, it goes in there really, really well. Okay. After I got both sides on, that's when I peeled off the other piece of backing. And then I just pressed it into place. And to be perfectly honest, if I ever find that that isn't enough Velcro, it will be very, very easy to put more in. Then I just repeat that on the other side. And just like that, everything's done except for the doors. So let's get those on there. So these are the doors. They originally stuck to the other panels, and we unstuck them from there, but they do have this double-sided, pretty darn strong tape on them. Now, this is the only thing I haven't been quite sure what to do with, because on one side of each door is taped this pretty nice, it's almost like surgical tubing, and it's very precise in its fit. And it seems nice enough to be like a permanent part of the door, but it doesn't fit down in the track. So I suspect it's only there for shipping to keep them from getting damaged, but it's just surprisingly nice. Anyway, after that, these need to be peeled. And if I remember correctly, they're not nearly as difficult to peel as the PVC panels. Oh yeah, oh look at that. For one thing, this coating is much thicker and less inclined to tear and just, oh, that is liberating. That is what that is. I'm not even winded after I take that off. Okay, let's see here. Oh, that's delightful. Now, this acrylic, I should mention, feels really hard. You know, it doesn't feel like it's going to scratch easily, which is actually kind of my only concern. I can tell you, it's so dang nice. This is probably the nicest piece of acrylic I've ever seen, at least in a reptile enclosure. For one thing, all the edges are rounded, so you know it's not going to cut you. Some enclosures I've been around, you know, you could definitely end up getting cut by the edges. These edges are so nice. They're rounded. It's delightful. It is crystal clear, and it's hard. And that's a big deal because bearded dragons in particular will go and they'll scratch at the glass. If it's glass, it's not a big deal. If it's acrylic, usually you lose a lot of the clarity because they put all these micro scratches into the glass. It's yet to be seen how well this will hold up. If it doesn't hold up, glass is considerably cheaper than acrylic like this, so you could replace the doors with glass. But I'm actually very optimistic that these are going to last and hold up and still look good, you know, years from now. So I will try to keep you updated, at least on Instagram, if nowhere else, as to what happens there. But let's go ahead and put our door handles on. It's kind of nice, even in the packaging, they have the screws for the door handles already into the door handle. Before I took the screws out and then took this off, but actually you can just, you'll do it any way you want. You can just peel that off, but I'm going to need to take them out no matter what. For this job, I did use my handy dandy Skele-Tool because I kind of wanted the control so I didn't over tighten them and maybe crack the glass, well, the acrylic. That wouldn't be easy to do, but I still wouldn't want it to happen. Sort of like most sliding doors, the tracks on the top are very, very deep, which allows you to push the doors up into the track high enough so that you can get them into the lower track. And just, as always, make sure you do the back track first. Done. Now a little more peeling, but this is that satisfying kind of peeling, not the workout kind of peeling that I'm used to at this point. All right. Man, we're close now. We're just a handle away. I do like these double screws. Keeps the handle from twisting. Oops, don't do that. That was just me testing the hardness of the acrylic, and so far so good. That was deliberate. Everything was deliberate. Let's actually see what that did do. Looks like nothing. So impressive, most impressive. All right. So let's turn that so you can see it. In fact, let's shine a little light on the subject, shall we? What do you think of that? Black or red? Black or red? Which one's better? I really like both, but I think I might actually be leaning towards this gray because it looks super cool. I don't know. How do you choose? Beautiful though. These look great. Tell me your vote down in the comments, black or gray. But I'm really very happy with both of these. Let's get a dragon in here and then I'll give you my final thoughts on this enclosure. Okay, so I just installed an Arcadia Pro T5 UVB light here inside of the enclosure. I'm going to put a heat lamp on there as well. It's going to be on the inside, but I'm going to need to get one that's kind of low profile. I also put in a little bit of cork bark, and I just threw an old water bowl in here just so we could get an idea what they'd think of it. But we got this awesome stacking kit, which is actually really simple, and it just slides into the holes, but you don't need to pound it in there, so it's easily reversible. And we're going to stack these enclosures on top of one another. Another something that we just experimented with, because we just put a light inside, is Jason and I got to figure out exactly how these little cord plugs work, and you just twist to a point where the center comes out and you can put the cords in. It's, as Jason would put it, a very elegant solution indeed. I'm honestly just really impressed with this enclosure. If you don't know me personally, you might not know this, but I'm not the kind of person who would ever tell you or could tell you to get something if I didn't think it was great. We've had sponsorship deals before where I didn't think it was a good product and we just didn't do it. And our whole team is on board with this. This enclosure is excellent. It's really, really excellent. If this is what you're looking for, there are other things that are similar, but this, I honestly can't come up with a way, at least so far, that I would improve on this. It's really, really good. And so let's get them stacked and see what the dragons think. Well, overall, I would say I am extremely impressed with the 4 foot by 2 foot by 2 foot reptile habitats from dubiaroaches.com. Gus, though I would say this is probably not quite big enough to be his actual enclosure. Legitimately, he could actually probably live in there for a little while. It's plenty of space for most bearded dragons. It's wonderful. So I think, Gus, what do you think? We give this our seal of approval? Yeah. I think this gets 4 thumbs up. And I'd very much recommend it. If you want to save some money on it, by the way, remember to check out our discount code. And as always, like and subscribe. And we hope to see you real soon. You like it, Gusserton? Yeah, you're a good boy. You're a good boy.